I would forecast in the next few months still continued weakness and not a strong housing market. Whether or not you want to call that a double dip, if you're looking at prices, it wouldn't surprise me to see a double dip. I don't think that means a double dip in the broader economy, but I do think that when looking at GDP growth and economic growth more broadly, we can't really, in the short term, look to housing to really help us.
This is At Brookings, a weekly in-depth look at the issues behind the news. This week, more troubles in the housing market. As the nation struggles to recover from a deep recession, the housing market continues to falter, despite record low mortgage rates. Ted Gaier, Senior Fellow and Co-Director of the Economic Studies Program at Brookings, examines the state of the housing market and what it means to the overall U.S. economy. Can you explain the importance of the housing market to the overall economy?
Housing and residential investment more broadly probably makes up a few percentage points of our economy. But it's even more important than that. And typically, coming out of a recession, housing and the housing sector leads us out of recession. Rates are low, people are looking to jump into the housing market, confidence builds, that leads to more construction jobs, hence more consumer spending and money in the economy and GDP growth. So traditionally, housing is a good indicator of where we're heading, especially coming out of a recession.
The past few weeks, there's been some bad news. Can you tell us what's going on now in the housing market?
After the collapse of the housing bubble, we saw an enormous amount of government intervention. So we saw on the demand side, we had the Federal Reserve had a lot of activity keeping rates down through purchasing mortgage-backed securities. We had the federal government, we had a tax credit, which was also trying to promote demand for purchases. And on the supply side, we had lots of government programs that were trying to prevent foreclosures and keep the supply of homes on the market down. I think where we are right now is those programs have either expired or they've largely played out. And one of the goals of those programs arguably was to kind of buy time until the market could be self-sustaining. I think the troubling economic data of the last few months is suggesting now that those programs are waning, the market is not indeed self-sustaining.
Which areas of the country have been hardest hit by this housing crisis, and which ones are beginning to rebound?
There's kind of the 5 states everyone really talks about that were the hardest hit. Nevada by far was the worst, Arizona, Florida, Michigan, and California. And if you look at those states, I mean, it's not a very surprising statistic, but if you were to, that ranking is essentially worst, most worst to least worst of those 5. If you look at those states, there was a recent study on nationwide mortgage or homeowners that are underwater in their mortgages. And that's the order right there. Nevada has a tremendous amount of people, mortgage holders that are still have home values that are worth less than what they owe. And you can go down the list of those 5 states.
The Housing Secretary, Sean Donovan, recently said that the Obama administration is going to roll out 2 tools in the next couple of weeks to help homeowners. One is a refinancing arrangement to help borrowers who owe more on their houses than the houses are worth, and the other is an emergency loan program for unemployed borrowers. What impact do you think those programs are going to have?
We've had a string of such programs, something called the HAMP and the HAFA program. There's all sorts of acronyms out there for the various programs we've had. And I think it's important to realize when you have the price declines that we've seen, compounded with the unemployment rates that are exceptionally high, there's really only so much you can do to prevent foreclosures, and your scope to do so is limited. The latest programs, therefore, I wouldn't have hugely high hopes, just given the scope of the problem. I do think they have some things working in their advantage. The existing programs that they had were not well targeted for people who were unemployed. So, for example, the one they recently announced does, I think, 2 things right. One is it's specifically targeted to high unemployment states, so it's trying to focus the dollars where they're most needed. And 2 is it's essentially a bridge loan for people who are unemployed, an interest-free bridge loan for 2 years.
You mentioned the $8,000 tax credit. The Housing Secretary won't say whether the administration is going to reinstitute that for first-time home buyers. It's expired now, but he also wouldn't say they won't renew it. Can you explain how that credit worked and what effect it had and what has happened since it expired?
There were various stages of the tax credit. Early on, it was a tax credit for first-time home buyers that they'd have to pay back later. Then it became a tax credit for first-time home buyers that didn't have to get paid back, and then it got expanded again into repeat home buyers. And now essentially we're paying back what we got before, and we don't have any demand out there. And I think we bought some time, but I don't know that that did us any good.
So do you think the administration will reinstate the first-time home buyer? Do you think they should?
I was against the last reinstatement, so or expansion of it. So I would my view is that they shouldn't do it again. Now I understand the temptation, especially when you're looking at a weak market. But the lesson I got from this is we gave into that temptation last time and spent some money, a considerable amount of money, and now we're left with still weak fundamentals. So it doesn't really buy you anything in the end, and kind of delaying the inevitable correction doesn't really help the broader economy.
Thank you very much, Ted.
Thank you. My pleasure.
And thank you for watching. I'm Ron Nesson. We'll be back next week with At Brookings. At Brookings is produced by the Brookings Institution. To learn more about the issues discussed on At Brookings, visit our website at brookings.edu.